we are saying, as Denmark, as the host of the COP15, should take...
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. We're broadcasting live from Copenhagen. We're the only grassroots global public television and radio news hour that is coming out of the COP15 summit daily for the full 2 weeks of this summit. Yes, this is Climate Countdown, and our guest today, Kumi Naidoo. He has just taken on the reins of one of the largest environmental groups in the world. It's Greenpeace International. He comes from South Africa, a longtime South African anti-apartheid activist. Kumi Naidoo, I want to go back to President Obama on the issue of war. And you just said he spent too much time in his Nobel Peace Address talking about war. What about this escalation of war in Afghanistan?
Well, this war is going to cost $30 billion a year in terms of the escalation. President Obama and the rest of the developed world have not yet put that amount of money to help poor countries cope with climate change. It is also something that I think it's a spiral that there doesn't appear to be a clear strategy to get out of it. But in any event, what we would say is that we have to look at the causes of war. There's too less emphasis on understanding and addressing the root causes of war. And we would say that addressing climate change, addressing human rights, addressing some of the issues of deep sense of injustice that people have faced, and putting more energy in that, we would have liked to have seen, a big chunk of that money be deployed for addressing the root causes of war. Because, if you look at the Darfur genocide, for example, one of the drivers of that has been the impacts of climate change. It's water scarcity, land scarcity, and so on. And even though there is, in the kind of spin, lip service is paid to the importance of development and so on, but if you interrogate the resource allocation, the amounts of money that are going to addressing development issues, building democratic institutions and so on, is still minuscule when compared to the amount of money that goes actually into military expenditure, and that's not good enough. And we would have expected better from President Obama.
So let's look at your history and look at what movements mean and what it means then to take on the leaders of your own movements when they move into government. Tell us a little about your history. You did not come to Greenpeace International as an environmentalist.
No. I started, well, I should say I didn't come as a conventional environmentalist. I was expelled from school when I was 15 years old for getting involved in a national student uprising against apartheid education.
Where did you live?
In Durban.
In Durban, South Africa.
And that probably was a very good thing, because it set me on a cause of struggling for justice, because, it was a very pivotal thing to happen. Then participated in both the mass movement as well as in the underground movement as part of Nelson Mandela's African National Congress. I had to flee the country when I was 22, and I was lucky that I had a Rhodes Scholarship and got to Oxford and Yale and got some education. Came back immediately after President Mandela was released from prison. Of course, he wasn't president then, to help build the ANC as a legal political party. I worked 1 year on a voluntary basis doing that. And then when the elections eventually came, I made a decision to stay out of government, even though I was offered positions, to help build civil society. Because what we felt was it was critically important for democracy that, in fact, we don't understand democracy simply as the singular act of voting in an election, every couple of years, but to actually ensure that there's real participation, real voice. And so I understand the problem that progressives in the United States are having, because, they are passionate about President Obama's candidacy, and now there are several positions that he's taken, obviously, that is not, necessarily in line with some of the expectations. So in South Africa, we confronted the same thing, and we evolved a notion of what we called critical solidarity, which we said was, we're obviously in solidarity with the first democratic government that we've had, but that solidarity has to be based on a critical basis, that if in fact there are policies that we disagree with, we must have the space to articulate that, we must be able to speak truth to power, and I'm happy to say that there is that space in South Africa to do that right now.
When you were tapped to be head of Greenpeace, you were not exactly sitting in your office waiting to receive a phone call.
Well, I was approached by the search company actually on the 19th day of a 21-day hunger strike to put pressure on my own government in South Africa to change its policy towards Zimbabwe. I had been in Zimbabwe at Christmas time consulting with colleagues there about how we might assist them from the outside, and people said to me, Kumi, go back home and get your government to stop acting like a condom to Robert Mugabe. And, you know, and what I saw was shocking, given this was one of the most promising countries on our continent. And of course, I also chair the Global Call to Action Against Poverty. And we have been doing, we have seen some time ago the connection between poverty and climate change, because we're seeing that climate change is doing two things with regard to poverty. One is it's exacerbating it immediately, and it's also reversing certain successes that we've had. So when the call came, I was a little bit surprised. I was deeply honored, because I've been a big admirer of Greenpeace ever since the French intelligence service sunk the Rainbow Warrior, the Greenpeace ship in Auckland, New Zealand in the mid-80s. Persuaded by my 16-year-old daughter, I got the confidence to go ahead with the process. And I'm very pleased actually to be at Greenpeace and to be able to connect these different agendas of human rights, poverty, and environmental activism.
I wanted to go right now to the Pacific Island nation of Tuvalu, which has taken